Tonight, we travel north, further north than most living things are willing to go, into a world of shifting ice and dark water, where the sky in winter disappears for months, and the sea itself becomes a kind of ceiling. There is an animal that lives here, a whale, pale as snow, quiet as the water beneath it, moving through one of the most unforgiving places on Earth, with a patience that feels almost deliberate. It has been here for a very long time. Long enough that the people who have lived alongside it for generations learned its habits the way you learn the habits of a neighbor, carefully, respectfully, over years. And yet, when word of this animal reached the wider world, it sounded like invention. A whale, some said, that carried a long, spiraling tusk through its face. A tusk that could reach the length of a man. A tooth, really, though nothing about it looks the way teeth are supposed to look. Early traders sold these tusks as unicorn horns, and people believed them because the alternative, that something this strange was simply real, simply alive, simply swimming through Arctic water right now, seemed harder to accept than a myth. The narwhal did not mind. It kept swimming. Hello there, and welcome to deep sea slumber. There is something quietly remarkable about an animal whose reality is stranger than the legend that replaced it. Most creatures, when examined closely, become more ordinary. The narwhal becomes more astonishing. The closer you look, the more questions open. Not anxious questions, just the kind that arrive when you sit with something genuinely unfamiliar and let it be what it is. Tonight, we are going to sit with it. We will travel into the high Arctic, into that spare, cold, beautiful world of fractured ice and dark water. We will spend time with an animal built for a place most things cannot survive, shaped by pressures and depths and temperatures that would end a human life in minutes. We will learn how it breathes, how it moves, how it finds its way through water so dark it offers almost nothing to the eye. We will wonder, gently, about what it might be like to carry something extraordinary through the world and simply go on living. There is no urgency in any of this. The narwhal does not hurry, neither will we. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let your shoulders settle. If they have been holding anything, and they often have by this hour, you can let that go now. There is nothing that needs holding tonight. Feel the weight of where you are, the bed, the chair, the quiet room around you. You are already somewhere safe. The narwhal has its ice. You have this. Let your breath slow a little, not forced, just allowed. The way water settles when nothing is disturbing it. We are going to drift north together, down through cold water and blue-white light, into a world that has been turning quietly for millions of years without our attention. It does not need our attention to be extraordinary. But there is something that happens when we give it. Something in us that slows and stills and remembers that the world is very large and very old and full of creatures living their whole lives in places we have never seen. The narwhal is one of those creatures, pale and unhurried, moving beneath ice that creaks and shifts above it, breathing at the surface when a gap opens, then descending again into the dark. It has been doing this since before there were words for it. Let's begin. The Arctic often hides its marvels in plain white light, and the narwhal carries perhaps the strangest of them all on its own face. Not a horn. That is the first thing to understand. What looks, from a distance, like something out of a medieval tapestry is in fact a tooth. A single elongated tooth growing forward from the upper left jaw, pressing through the lip, extending outward into the water ahead of the animal. It can reach 2.5 to 3 meters in length. In some individuals, it reaches nearly the length of the animal itself, a single tooth, growing for most of its life through the animal's own face. The narwhal has 2 teeth embedded in its upper jaw. In females, both usually stay put, small, hidden, never emerging. In males, the left tooth almost always begins to grow. It does not grow straight. It spirals, always counterclockwise, in a long and gradual helix that winds from base to tip. The spiral is consistent across individuals in a way that suggests it is not random variation, but something deeply encoded, something the body knows how to do. What makes this consistency remarkable is how unusual it is in the natural world. Spirals in biology tend to vary. Shells coil at different pitches. Horns curve at different angles. The narwhal tusk spirals the same way in every male, as if following an instruction that has not changed in a very long time. The right tooth in most males stays small. It remains embedded in the jaw, a quiet echo of the tusk beside it. Occasionally, in roughly 1 in 500 animals, both teeth erupt. A double-tusked narwhal, 2 long spiraling teeth extending forward in parallel. This is rare enough that it was once thought to be myth, and common enough that a handful have been documented, confirmed, photographed. The body, it turns out, knows how to do this too. It simply usually chooses otherwise. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The capacity for 2 tusks is apparently always there. The decision, if that is even the right word for something that happens in bone and tissue and slow biological time, to grow only 1 is what defines almost every male narwhal alive. The exception reveals the rule. The rule reveals the choice, written into development, quietly maintained across an entire species. For centuries, the tusk was the only part of the narwhal that most of the world ever encountered. The animal itself was distant, inaccessible, locked behind sea ice and Arctic cold. But the tusk traveled. Inuit hunters had known narwhals intimately for generations, and the tusks found their way into trade routes that carried them south and east, across oceans, into the hands of merchants and royalty who had no idea what animal had grown them. They were sold as unicorn horn. Alicorn, the substance was called, and the belief attached to it was extraordinary. Alicorn was thought to neutralize poison, cure disease, detect contaminated food or drink by sweating or changing color in its presence. Thrones and scepters were made from it. Cups carved from it were placed before kings. The asking price was several times the weight of the tusk in gold. The trade lasted centuries. Tusks arrived in European markets through intermediaries who had no interest in revealing their source. The mystique was part of the value. A unicorn horn explained itself. It came from a creature of impossible beauty and magical power, and that story required no verification. Nobody needed to ask whether unicorn had been caught, or how, or by whom. What is quietly remarkable about this is not the deception, it is the sincerity. People who owned these tusks genuinely believed in their properties. Rulers who drank from cups carved from narwhal ivory genuinely believed they were protected. The tusk was embedded in a whole worldview, a whole way of understanding what was possible, and it fit there so naturally that nobody looked for the seam. The narwhal, meanwhile, continued living beneath the ice, entirely unaware that it had become a legend. It was not until the late 16th century that the identification began to solidify, that naturalists examining the tusks, comparing them against other known teeth and bones, began to suspect they came from a whale rather than a magical horse. And even then, the knowledge spread slowly. The unicorn did not disappear from European imagination all at once. It retreated gradually, the way myths do, leaving behind a residue of wonder that attached itself to the real animal once people finally accepted what it was. The real animal, it turns out, does not need mythology to be astonishing. The tusk is not inert. It is not simply long. It is porous at a microscopic level, filled with tiny channels, millions of them, running from the interior pulp of the tooth outward toward the surface. These channels are called tubules, and in most teeth, they are sealed, protected, buried safely inside the jaw. In the narwhal tusk, they open to the sea. The seawater enters, or rather, the tusk is permeable to it. The pulp inside the tooth connects through all those tiny channels to the cold Arctic water flowing past. Pressure, temperature, salinity, these things register. The tusk, in other words, is a sense organ, a 10 million tubule antenna extending forward into the water, reading the environment with a precision that is difficult to fully imagine. This was not widely understood until the early 2000s, when a marine biologist named Martin Nuaya and his colleagues examined narwhal tusks under electron microscopes and found what no one had thought to look for. The tubules were there. The permeability was there. The nerves running through the tusk's interior were there. The tusk was not decorative. It was, at least in part, a sensory structure of considerable sophistication. What the narwhal actually does with this information, how it uses the temperature readings, the salinity gradients, the subtle pressure shifts, is not fully known. It may help them locate the edges of sea ice. It may help them find water where fish are likely to be. It may give them information about the sea in ways that have no equivalent in human experience, ways that we do not have the right questions to ask about yet. That is a particular kind of not knowing, not the absence of data, but the absence of a framework. We do not yet understand what we are not understanding. And then there is the other question, what the tusk means socially. Because narwhals with longer tusks appear to be more socially dominant. Males have been observed crossing their tusks at the surface, a behavior called tusking, slow and deliberate, contact between two long spiraling teeth in open Arctic air. Whether this is combat, display, communication, or something else is still being worked out. Possibly it is all of these at different times, in different contexts with different animals. The tusk may also be a signal of health. Growing a 3-meter tooth through your own jaw and carrying it through cold water for decades is metabolically expensive. An animal that can do this is demonstrating something about its condition, its access to food, its resistance to disease, its underlying fitness. This is a pattern seen across the animal kingdom. Structures that are costly to grow and maintain function as honest signals precisely because they cannot be faked. The tusk tells the truth about the animal that grew it. There is something almost philosophical in that. The most visible thing about the narwhal, the thing that defined it in human imagination for centuries, is not a weapon, not armor, not a tool for manipulation. It is a declaration, a long, spiraling, counterclockwise declaration of what kind of animal this is, what it has endured, what it is capable of. And it does this while also sensing the temperature of the water. The double-tusked individuals complicate the social display theory slightly, or at least raise questions about it. If the tusk is partly a signal of individual fitness, what does it mean to grow too? Are double-tusked males more dominant, less, different? There are too few of them to study well. They exist at the edge of what can be known, which is perhaps where the most interesting questions always live. In some males, the tusk eventually breaks. A long tooth extending that far into the world encounters things: ice, other tusks, the seafloor during deep dives. A broken tusk does not regrow. The animal continues with what remains, the spiral interrupted, the tip gone. And yet these animals survive, feed, travel the same routes. Whatever the tusk provides, the animal adapts to its absence, or continues without it. That adaptation is its own kind of quiet fact. The tusk matters enough to grow for decades. The animal continues without it when it must. Both things are true. What remains, when you hold all of this together, is an image of something that evolved over a very long time into a form that does several things at once: displays, senses, signals, possibly communicates, and that we are only beginning to understand the full range of. The tusk is not one thing. It is many things wearing the shape of one thing. A tooth that became a legend. A legend that turned out to be stranger than the myth. The narwhal does not know it was once a unicorn. It does not know what a unicorn is. It moves through the dark water with its long spiral tooth extended forward, reading the cold, and the cold reads nothing back. The sea does not explain itself. The animal does not ask it to. It simply continues, patient, ancient, sensing the world through a tooth that points the way it has always pointed, forward into whatever comes next. And after the tusk has taken our attention, the rest of the narwhal quietly reveals an animal just as astonishing in every other direction. The tusk is what people remember. It is the thing that made sailors reach for myth. But behind that long spiral tooth is a body that has been shaped over millions of years into something precisely suited to one of the most difficult environments on Earth. Not adapted in a general sense. Adapted in the way a key is adapted to a specific lock. Particular, careful, and exact in ways that only become visible when you begin to look. Start with what the body feels like from the outside. A narwhal is dense, not large compared to many whales. An adult might reach 15 or 16 feet in length, not counting the tusk, but compact in a way that speaks to heat conservation rather than speed. The body is thick through the middle. Blubber lines the entire animal, sometimes reaching depths of several inches, forming an insulating layer between the cold Arctic water and everything vital inside. In some individuals, blubber accounts for close to a third of total body weight. That is not excess. That is engineering. What blubber does, at its most basic, is slow the movement of heat. The ocean in the high Arctic can drop below freezing in terms of what a human body would recognize as survivable. Seawater freezes at a lower temperature than fresh water, which means the sea can remain liquid at temperatures that would be lethal to an unprotected mammal. A narwhal moves through water that is colder than the inside of a freezer, and it does so continuously for a lifetime. The blubber is not a winter coat. It is the permanent architecture of survival. There is something worth sitting with in that. Not just the thickness of the blubber, but what it means to carry warmth as a structural feature of the body. The narwhal does not seek warmth, it contains it. The heat is built in, held in, preserved across every dive and every hour of open water travel, not by behavior alone, but by the very composition of what the animal is made of. The shape of the body cooperates with this. Narwhals are round, not in a way that suggests softness, but in the way that a sphere conserves heat better than a flat surface, less area exposed relative to the volume inside. The limbs, such as they are, contribute to this. The flippers are short and paddle-like, turned slightly at the tips. They are not built for long, powerful strokes. They are built for maneuverability in close quarters, for navigating through leads in the ice, for the kind of precise movement that matters more in a fractured seascape than raw speed. Heat loss through extremities is one of the primary challenges for any warm-blooded animal in cold water. Shorter flippers lose less heat. The shape is the solution. And then there is what is missing. Most whales have a dorsal fin, the triangular ridge along the top of the back that helps with stability and steering. Narwhals do not. Where a dorsal fin would be, there is instead a low, bumpy ridge running along part of the back, barely raised from the surface. The absence is not an accident. It is one of the clearest examples of how the Arctic has shaped this animal in ways that only make sense when you think about the specific problem of living beneath ice. A dorsal fin, projecting upward from the back, would be a liability in a world where the ceiling is made of ice. Narwhals must surface to breathe, and they must do so in gaps between ice flows, in narrow leads, in cracks that may be only just wide enough. A tall dorsal fin would catch. It would obstruct. It would make the approach to a breathing hole more dangerous rather than less. The loss of that fin, or rather, the evolutionary pressure that prevented it from developing in the first place, is the body making a quiet bargain. Stability traded for access. Hydrodynamic elegance traded for the ability to press close to the underside of a frozen ceiling and find air. The body knows what world it lives in. Now, go deeper. Below the blubber and the smooth exterior, the narwhal's circulatory system has its own adaptations, ones that speak to a different kind of pressure entirely. Narwhals dive. This is not a casual observation. These animals regularly descend to depths of over 1,000 meters, more than 3,000 feet, in search of prey. Some dives have been recorded at nearly 1,800 meters. At those depths, the pressure is enormous, many times greater than at the surface. The weight of the water column above presses inward from every direction. For a lung-breathing mammal, this creates a specific and serious problem. The problem is oxygen. A narwhal takes a breath at the surface and then carries that oxygen downward into darkness, into cold, into pressure that would compress a human lung to a fraction of its normal size. The dive might last 25 minutes. It might be deeper than the tallest building ever constructed. And throughout the entire descent and ascent, the narwhal's body must manage its oxygen supply with extraordinary precision, using just enough in just the right places at just the right times, so that when the animal finally rises again, there is enough left to complete the ascent without losing consciousness. This is not something narwhals think about. It is something their bodies do automatically through a set of physiological mechanisms that took millions of years to develop. One of the most important is the concentration of myoglobin in their muscles. Myoglobin is a protein that stores oxygen directly in muscle tissue. It is what makes the flesh of diving mammals so dark, almost black in some species, compared to animals that spend their lives at the surface. Narwhal muscle is dense with it. When a narwhal dives, its muscles draw on that stored oxygen, rather than competing with the brain and heart for what little remains in the lungs. The muscles carry their own supply. They are, in a sense, self-sufficient. At the same time, the cardiovascular system begins to slow and redirect. Heart rate drops. Blood flow is restricted to the organs that need it most, the brain, the heart itself, while circulation to the muscles, the digestive system, the extremities is reduced. The body prioritizes. It makes a triage decision automatically on every deep dive. These systems get oxygen, these others wait. This is called the dive response, and it is found in varying degrees across all diving mammals. In narwhals, it is refined to a degree that seems almost deliberate. There is also the matter of what happens to the lungs themselves under pressure. As depth increases, the gas in a narwhal's lungs compresses. The lungs actually collapse, partially at depth. And this is not a malfunction, but a feature. A collapsed lung does not allow nitrogen to continue dissolving into the bloodstream, which prevents the kind of gas bubble formation that causes decompression sickness in human divers who ascend too quickly. The narwhal's chest is flexible enough to allow this collapse without damage. The ribs are not rigidly fixed in the way that human ribs are. They can yield. The whole architecture of the chest is designed for compression, for the deep squeeze of pressure, and for the return to full function when the animal rises back toward the surface. Think about what this means. Every deep dive is a controlled surrender to pressure. The body yields, compresses, conserves, and then re-expands, and does so dozens of times in a single day across a lifetime of winters. Not once does this require any conscious management on the narwhal's part. The body knows the protocol. It has always known it. Cold itself adds another layer to all of this. Water conducts heat away from a warm body far more efficiently than air does. A narwhal submerged in near-freezing Arctic water is losing heat to its environment at every moment, even with all that blubber. The circulatory system has an answer for this too, in the form of what physiologists call countercurrent heat exchange. In the flippers and other extremities, arteries and veins run closely alongside one another. Warm arterial blood traveling outward from the body's core passes its heat to the cooler venous blood, returning from the extremities before that cold blood can reach the core. The result is that the core stays warm, the extremities stay cool, and very little heat escapes into the water. It is an elegant internal recycling system, not invented by narwhals, but present in them in a form tuned to some of the coldest water on the planet. The body is full of these quiet trades: warmth for insulation, stability for access, speed for efficiency. Nothing is free and nothing is wasted. And then there is one more thing about the narwhal body that is easy to overlook because it is invisible: the skin. Narwhals shed and renew their outer skin layer in summer, often gathering in shallow coastal areas and rubbing against gravel and sand in what appears to be an active behavior, not accidental contact. The skin lightens as narwhals age, beginning mottled and dark in calves, and gradually becoming paler, almost white, in old animals. The color change happens slowly across decades. An old narwhal carries its age on its skin in a way that is readable if you know what to look for. A pale animal, almost luminous in the dim Arctic light, moving through dark water with the quiet authority of something that has survived a very long time in a very difficult place. There is something in that image that settles slowly. A body built for cold. A body built for depth. A body built for a world where the ceiling freezes and the darkness is absolute, and the pressure at the bottom of a dive would crush anything not specifically designed for it. And yet the narwhal moves through all of this without urgency. It does not race through its environment. It navigates it, slowly in groups, following routes that may have been traveled by its ancestors for thousands of years. The strangeness of the tusk is what people see first. But the strangeness of the body is, in its own way, just as profound. Because the tusk is unusual. The rest of the narwhal is a kind of proof that survival in a severe world does not require drama. It requires precision. It requires patience. It requires a body that has learned, across deep time, exactly what it is for. The narwhal does not struggle against the cold. It is made of it. A body shaped for the Arctic makes more sense once we remember what hangs above it. Not open sky, but a roof that is always changing. For most air-breathing animals, the surface is simply there. A seal can haul out. A dolphin can leap. A whale can roll and breathe and rest at the waterline for as long as it needs. But narwhals live in a place where the surface is not guaranteed, where the ceiling above them can seal closed overnight, where the boundary between water and air, the one boundary every mammal depends on, is made of something that moves and thickens and sometimes disappears entirely. That is not a metaphor. That is the physical reality of the narwhal's world. The Arctic Ocean is not simply cold open water. It is a dynamic system of ice in constant slow negotiation with temperature, wind, and season. In winter, the sea surface freezes outward from the coasts and spreads across thousands of kilometers of ocean. In summer, it retreats. But neither process is clean or total. The ice is never one solid sheet. It is a landscape in itself. Thick, multi-year flows that have survived several winters, thinner seasonal ice that formed only months ago, pressure ridges where flows have collided and buckled upward, and the dark lines of open water between them. Those dark lines are called leads. A lead is simply a crack in the ice where open water is exposed. It can be a meter wide or a kilometer wide. It can appear quickly when ice shifts and separates, and it can close just as quickly when wind or current pushes the flows back together. Leads are not reliable. They are not permanent. They are the narwhal's breathing space, and they come and go on schedules the narwhal cannot fully control. Imagine being a mammal in that world. Imagine needing to breathe every few minutes and knowing that the surface above you may or may not be open when you arrive at it. Narwhals have lived this way for millions of years. What makes this so striking is not just the danger of it, but the depth of the adaptation it has required. Narwhals are not simply tolerating the ice. They are reading it. They are navigating beneath it, finding leads, locating breathing holes, understanding through some combination of memory, echolocation, and sensitivity to light and pressure exactly where the open water is and how far away it might be. The ability to hold breath matters here, and we have already seen how narwhals manage oxygen with exceptional care. But the reason that ability evolved becomes clearer now. A narwhal diving beneath ice cannot simply turn around if it runs short on air. It must know, before it descends, that there will be somewhere to surface. That knowledge, that spatial awareness beneath a frozen ceiling, is part of what the narwhal body and mind have been shaped to carry. In the deepest winter, sea ice in the high Arctic can reach 2 meters of thickness or more. Below that ice, light dims to almost nothing. The narwhal moves through this near dark, aware of the solid ceiling above, reading the underside of the ice the way a person might read a map. Areas where ice is thin allow a faint blue-grey light to filter down. Areas where ice is thick are darker. Leads appear as bright lines overhead, lit from above by whatever daylight the Arctic offers. Narwhals are believed to use these light gradients as one of several cues for finding open water. There is something almost architectural about the underside of sea ice. It is not flat. Pressure ridges create downward hanging keels that can extend several meters below the surface. Melt pools from summer leave uneven textures frozen into the underside. Channels and hollows form where currents have eroded the ice from below. This is the ceiling the narwhal moves beneath, and it is as varied and complex as any landscape above the water. Some narwhals have been observed using small cracks and breathing holes in ice, too thick for most animals to navigate. A breathing hole used by a narwhal can be surprisingly small, just wide enough for the animal to push its blunt, rounded head through and exhale. They have been observed in areas of ice cover so dense that the open water available is only a fraction of the surface above them. They find it anyway. The seasonal rhythm of this relationship between narwhal and ice is one of the quieter marvels of Arctic biology. In summer, sea ice retreats northward, and many narwhals move into coastal fjords and bays, areas of relatively shallow water where the ice has cleared and breathing is easy. These are their summering grounds, and they arrive in groups, sometimes hundreds of animals in the same bay, resting near the surface, feeding, raising calves. The surface in summer is simply open water, and the narwhal can breathe freely, and something about that openness seems to matter to them. Then autumn comes, and the ice returns. The narwhals move offshore, back toward deeper water, and the ice spreads behind them. They winter in the densely ice-covered waters of Baffin Bay and Davis Strait, areas where the ice coverage can reach 80% or more of the surface. They dive deep, those long, oxygen-efficient dives we have already seen, and they surface into leads and cracks and breathing holes, and they navigate a world that is mostly ceiling. What is remarkable is that they choose this, or rather, that evolution chose it for them. And over millions of years, the narwhal became so fitted to this existence that it no longer simply survives the ice-covered winter. It depends on it. The under-ice environment in winter is where narwhals find much of their food. Deep-water fish and squid that are themselves following the cold, dark, productive waters beneath the ice. The ice that makes breathing difficult is also the ice that shelters the ecosystem narwhals rely on. That is the strange logic of the Arctic. The hardship and the abundance come from the same source. Yet the ice is not always survivable. There is a phenomenon called an aivu. In some Inuit languages, a word for ice that moves suddenly and violently when pressure pushes flows together with enormous force. And there is sasatsat, a Greenlandic term for a condition in which sea ice freezes suddenly and completely over an area where narwhals have been feeding, trapping them. When this happens, the narwhals must find any opening they can. If none exists, they will push their heads against the ice, breathing through cracks, sometimes sharing a small hole among many animals at once. This is not a rare event in the historical record. It has been observed and documented for centuries by Inuit hunters, who sometimes harvested narwhals that had become trapped this way. The animals that survive are the ones who find the opening, or who were already close enough to a lead when the ice closed. That vulnerability, that a ceiling can simply shut, is one of the most sobering facts about narwhal existence. All that blubber, all that circulatory efficiency, all that capacity for deep and oxygen-sparing dives, and still the animal can be caught by a change in the weather. Still, the world can close around it. And yet, the narwhal has not abandoned this world. It has not migrated south to open ocean. It has not evolved toward ice-free coasts. It lives here, in the most ice-covered, most demanding marine environment on the planet, and it returns to it every year, reliably, generation after generation. That says something about what the ice-covered Arctic offers that nowhere else does. Safety from orcas, who rarely venture into heavy pack ice. Food that is abundant beneath the frozen surface. A cold that the narwhal's body manages so well it has become an advantage rather than a threat. The ceiling that could kill them is also the ceiling that protects them. That is the kind of double logic that deep evolutionary time tends to produce. Not simple solutions, but intricate ones, where the danger and the shelter are the same thing, and survival means learning to read both at once. The ice, then, is not simply the narwhal's habitat. It is more like a partner, unpredictable, sometimes lethal, absolutely essential. The narwhal does not merely tolerate the ceiling above it. It has organized its entire existence around that ceiling's rhythms, its openings, its closures, its seasonal retreats and advances. A life patterned by something so vast and so indifferent. There is a particular quality to imagining a narwhal beneath the ice in the deep of winter. The world above is white and still. The world below is dark and cold and full of slow movement. The animal rises, finds a lead, breathes, one breath, two breaths, and descends again into the dim, into the deep, into the quiet space beneath the ceiling it has been reading since it was born. The ice shifts overhead almost imperceptibly. The lead narrows a little. The narwhal somewhere below does not know this yet. It will know when it returns. It has always returned. That patience, that ancient, practiced negotiation with a world that does not remain still, is perhaps the most quietly remarkable thing about the narwhal. Not the tusk, not the blubber, not the diving. The fact that this animal has found a way to live between water and ice, between breadth and depth, between the open and the closed, and has been doing so for longer than we can fully trace. The ceiling moves. The narwhal moves with it. That is what it means to belong to a place so completely that even its dangers feel like home. In a world where ice can close the surface and depth swallows the light, vision becomes a limited thing. The Arctic water beneath sea ice is not entirely dark, not always. In summer, filtered blue light presses down through thin ice, and the upper layers of the ocean hold a dim, shifting luminescence. But that light fades quickly with depth. Below 100 meters, it is very nearly gone. Below 200, it is gone entirely. And narwhals dive far deeper than that, down to 1,500 meters, into water that has never known sunlight at all. In that darkness, the narwhal does not slow down. It does not feel its way blindly. It listens. Sound moves through water differently than through air. Faster, for one thing, nearly 5 times faster, and farther. A sound made in the deep ocean can, under the right conditions, travel for hundreds of kilometers before it fades. Water is, in this sense, a better medium for sound than air has ever been. And life in the ocean has had hundreds of millions of years to discover this. Cetaceans, whales, dolphins, porpoises have built entire sensory worlds around it. Narwhals produce sounds, complex sounds, layered sounds, sounds that serve different purposes at different moments. Some of what they produce is social. Clicks and pulses and tonal calls that move through the pod, connecting one animal to another across the dim and pressurized water. But one category of sound is something else entirely. It is not communication in the way we typically mean. It is navigation. It is perception. It is a way of seeing without eyes. It is echolocation. And narwhals are among the most sophisticated practitioners of it in the ocean. The basic principle is elegant in its simplicity. The animal produces a rapid pulse of sound. That pulse travels outward through the water. When it strikes something, a fish, a rock, the underside of ice, the floor of the sea, some of it bounces back. The animal detects the returning echo, and from the tiny interval between the outgoing pulse and the returning echo, from the quality of the reflection, from the angle and the strength of the returning sound, the animal builds a picture, not a visual picture, something more like a textured, dimensional sense of what is out there, what is near, what is far, what is moving, what is still, what is hard, what is soft, what is alive. The resolution of this picture is remarkable. Studies on related cetaceans suggest that echolocation can detect objects just a few millimeters across. It can distinguish between objects of similar size but different density. It can perceive the difference between a fish with a swim bladder and one without, because the air-filled bladder reflects sound differently than solid tissue. This is not a rough sketch of the world. It is a detailed and continuously updated map. That is why narwhals do not need the light. They are already reading the water. The sound begins in a structure called the phonic lips, a pair of small folds of tissue just below the blowhole in the nasal region near the top of the head. When air is pushed through these folds under pressure, they vibrate and produce sound. The narwhal does not have vocal cords as we understand them. The sound does not come from the throat. It originates in a structure that has no direct equivalent in any land mammal, a structure that evolved specifically for this purpose in animals that had already been living in the sea for tens of millions of years. The sound then passes through a remarkable structure called the melon. In narwhals, the melon is a large rounded mass of fatty tissue that sits in the forehead, that distinctive rounded brow visible in photographs of living narwhals at the surface. The melon is not decorative. It is a lens. Its fatty composition, varying in density across its structure, focuses and shapes the outgoing pulse of sound, directing it forward through the water in a beam, the way a flashlight concentrates light into a cone. The narwhal, in other words, is pointing its echolocation the way you would aim a torch. And the returning echo, the reflection of that beam, is received not through the ears, at least not primarily. Sound is received through the lower jaw, which in cetaceans contains a channel of fat that conducts vibrations inward to the inner ear. The jaw, in this sense, is listening. The whole front of the animal's head is organized around the production, shaping, and reception of sound. It is a sensory apparatus built into the architecture of the skull. What makes this worth pausing on is not the mechanism. It is what the mechanism represents. The entire front of the narwhal's head, the melon, the phonic lips, the fat-filled jaw, exists because an ancestor of this animal moved into the water and slowly, across enormous spans of time, lost one way of perceiving the world and gained another. Vision did not disappear, but it was joined by something more suited to the medium. The narwhal's head is a monument to that adaptation. The clicks narwhals produce for echolocation are among the highest frequency sounds made by any whale. High-frequency sound is useful for echolocation because shorter wavelengths resolve finer detail. They bounce back from smaller objects and carry more information about surface texture and density. Low-frequency sounds travel farther but blur the details. High-frequency sounds sacrifice range for resolution. Narwhals seem to have chosen resolution. Their clicks are rapid, sometimes produced in long buzzing sequences called click trains, where individual pulses follow one another so quickly they blur into a continuous sound to human ears. As a narwhal approaches something of interest, the click rate increases. The returning echoes arrive faster and faster. The picture sharpens. In the final moments before capture, before a fish is taken, before a decision is made, the click train can reach hundreds of pulses per second. This is called a terminal buzz, and it is one of the most precise sensory events in the animal kingdom. A narwhal descending through total darkness at 1,500 meters of depth in water near freezing, producing a focused beam of high-frequency sound and listening to the returning echoes at hundreds of pulses per second, is not navigating blindly. It is navigating with a precision that our own senses cannot match in any equivalent environment. We cannot see in the dark. We cannot hear at those frequencies. We cannot feel the returning echo of our own voice and read it as a landscape. The narwhal does all of this as a matter of ordinary life. Ice complicates the acoustic world in ways that are worth considering slowly. The underside of sea ice is not flat. It is an irregular surface of ridges and keels and pressure formations, some of them descending meters below the general ice layer, others forming smooth pockets of air. This surface reflects sound. It scatters it. An echolocating narwhal in icy water is navigating in an environment where the returns are complex, where the ceiling is not a clean mirror, but a fractured and irregular one, constantly returning partial reflections from a dozen different angles. And yet, narwhals find their breathing holes. They navigate between pressure ridges in the dark. They locate the leads, those narrow cracks of open water, even when those leads are closing. There is evidence that narwhals can detect the difference between ice thick enough to block them and ice thin enough to break through, presumably through the acoustic properties of the reflection. Ice of different thickness reflects sound differently. The narwhal may be listening to the ceiling and reading its texture the way a hand reads a surface in the dark. That is a kind of knowledge so different from our own that it is difficult to fully imagine. But it is real. It is happening right now beneath the ice. Narwhals also listen to sounds they did not make. Passive listening, simply receiving the sounds of the environment, is part of how cetaceans understand their world. The ocean is not silent. It is full of sound. The grinding of ice against ice, the low rumble of distant water movement, the sounds of other animals, the particular acoustic signature of a school of fish. A narwhal moving through Arctic water is immersed in a constant acoustic landscape, and some portion of what it perceives is simply the world announcing itself. The sounds of ice are particularly rich. Sea ice creaks and groans and pops as it expands and contracts with temperature. It produces low-frequency sounds when it fractures, higher sounds when it settles. Narwhals have been recorded changing their behavior in response to the sounds of ice, moving away from areas where ice is forming, moving toward areas where leads are opening. It is possible that they are reading the ice acoustically, hearing the difference between a stable surface and one that is about to close. Sound, then, is not only how narwhals navigate, it may be how they understand the weather. And then there is the question of the tusk, that long, spiraling tooth that has already occupied so much of this night. The tusk, as we explored earlier, is densely innervated. It is full of nerve endings that appear to be sensitive to pressure, salinity, temperature. It may be a sensory organ for sampling the water. But there is another possibility, still discussed and not yet resolved, that the tusk may play some role in the narwhal's acoustic world. Sound travels through solid structures differently than through water. The tusk, projecting forward from the narwhal's head, sits precisely in the path of the outgoing echolocation beam. Whether it interferes with that beam, shapes it, or plays no role at all is not yet known. But the geometry is suggestive. The tusk begins where the melon's focused sound is projected forward. Whether this is coincidence or something more remains an open question, one that the narwhal is not answering. Some of the most interesting questions about living things are the ones that the animals themselves carry quietly, giving us only the shape of the mystery without its resolution. What remains after all of this is a simple image. A narwhal moving through water so dark it is effectively lightless, at a depth where pressure has become enormous, clicking steadily into the void and reading the returning echoes the way a reader moves through text, continuously, fluidly, building meaning from pattern. The world it perceives in that darkness is real. It is detailed. It is sufficient for everything the narwhal needs to do. We tend to think of darkness as the absence of information, but the narwhal lives in darkness and is surrounded by information. Information carried not by light, but by sound, by pressure, by the slow movement of cold water against sensitive skin. The world does not go quiet when the light fails. It simply changes the language it speaks in. And the narwhal, over millions of years, learned to listen. But anatomy is only the beginning of this story, because every feature of the narwhal body exists in motion. The Arctic is not a fixed place. It shifts with the seasons in ways that few other landscapes do. The ice advancing and retreating across hundreds of miles, the open water appearing and closing again on a rhythm that is both ancient and unpredictable. And the narwhal moves with it, not randomly, not simply chasing whatever is available, but along routes that appear to be known. Routes that are traveled year after year by the same animals, in the same general sequence, toward the same destinations. The Arctic may look empty from above, a white and featureless expanse of ice and grey water. To a narwhal, it is full of roads. migration in narwhals follows the broad shape that many Arctic animals share. In winter, they move offshore into deeper water, where the ice above is heavy and the darkness is nearly complete. In spring, as the ice begins to loosen and leads of open water appear, they move toward the coast. By summer, they gather in shallow fjords and bays along the coasts of Canada, Greenland, and the Russian Arctic. The water warmer, the light returning, the sea full of prey. Then, as autumn draws the ice back down, they retreat again into the deep. The cycle repeats. It has been repeating for a very long time. What makes this movement remarkable is not simply that it happens, but how consistent it is. Satellite tracking has followed individual narwhals across years, and what the data shows is that the same animals return to the same summer grounds, following roughly the same paths, arriving within similar windows of time. This is not wandering. This is something closer to memory made into motion. The routes themselves are not visible. There are no landmarks in open water, no signs, no paths worn into the ground. And yet the paths exist, encoded somehow in the animals that travel them. The working theory is that narwhals learn their migration routes from the animals around them, that calves travel with their mothers and acquire the knowledge of where to go, how to get there, and when to turn back. In this way, the route is not just a behavior. It is something passed between generations, a kind of inheritance that cannot be held or seen, only followed. That is a quiet kind of wonder. The idea that an Arctic seascape, which appears empty to a human observer, is in fact threaded with meaning. That certain channels, certain stretches of deep water, certain bays are known, remembered and returned to, not because any individual animal discovered them, but because they were given the way a story is given from one life to the next. Narwhals do not migrate alone. They travel in groups, and the structure of those groups shifts across the season. In winter, the groups are often large, hundreds of animals, sometimes more, moving together through deep offshore water. These aggregations may offer warmth in the collective sense, the simple advantage of many bodies sharing space in cold water, though the full reasons for their winter groupings are not entirely understood. As spring approaches and the animals begin to move toward the coast, the groups reorganize. Males and females often travel separately, a pattern that holds through much of the year. Females with calves form their own groups, moving at a pace that accommodates the youngest members. The social geography of migration is not uniform. It has texture, structure, a kind of order that is not random. The movement itself, when it can be observed, is not hurried. Narwhals are not built for speed in the way that some dolphins are. They are built for endurance and for navigating complicated icy terrain. They travel at a pace that might seem leisurely to a human observer, but that covers enormous distances over the course of weeks. From deep winter grounds to summer fjords, some populations move more than 1,000 miles. The journey is not a sprint. It is a long, patient passage through a world that is simultaneously familiar and always changing. Breathing shapes every part of that passage. A narwhal cannot swim an unbroken line across the Arctic. It must surface. And in the waters they travel, surfacing is not always simple. In winter, the ice is thick and the leads are narrow and unpredictable. Even on migration, the animals are reading the ice above them, using their acoustic senses to locate the open water ahead, making the constant small calculations that have been part of their lives since birth. Movement and breath are inseparable. Every mile traveled is also a series of decisions about where to rise, when to breathe, how long to descend before the next ascent. There is something meditative about that rhythm, considered from a distance. A life that cannot be paused, that requires the surface again and again, and yet that moves through such vast distances, such depths, such cold, threading the needle between ice and water, between descent and return, for an entire lifetime. In summer, when the narwhals arrive in their coastal fjords, the mood of the group changes perceptibly. The animals spread through the shallow water, moving less urgently, spending more time near the surface. The fjords they favor are specific. Certain bays in the Canadian high Arctic, certain inlets along the west coast of Greenland, places that appear year after year in the records and in the observations of Inuit hunters who have watched narwhals for generations. The animals know these places. The places know the animals, in the sense that the ecosystems there have been shaped in part by their repeated presence, the nutrients they bring, the prey populations they influence. What draws them to the same fjords each summer is not fully resolved. Prey availability is part of it. The summer grounds are productive, and the animals feed heavily during these months. Social reasons may also play a role. The summer aggregations are the largest gatherings of the year, and they may serve functions beyond feeding. Mating likely occurs during this period. Social bonds are maintained or formed, and calves born in summer have their first months of life in these relatively protected waters. The fjord is not just a feeding ground. It may be something more like a home, in the deepest sense of a place that is returned to, that is known, that holds meaning. Then autumn comes, and the ice follows, and the narwhals move again. The departure from summer grounds appears to be triggered by some combination of environmental cues: temperature, light, ice conditions, though the exact signals are still being studied. What is known is that the departure tends to be fairly abrupt. Animals that have spent weeks in a fjord will leave within a short window, the group reorganizing and turning offshore, back toward the deep water where winter will be spent. The road that brought them here is traveled in reverse. The consistency of this pattern across years and across generations raises a question that is difficult to answer precisely, but impossible to ignore. How much of this do the narwhals understand? Not in the way a human understands a map, with labels and distances and conscious planning, but in the way that a body knows a place, a felt familiarity, a recognition that is not intellectual, but something older and more immediate. The fjord at the end of a long migration may not be remembered as a concept. It may simply be recognized, the way a smell can be recognized before you can name it, the way a sound can feel known before you have thought about why. What we can say with confidence is that the roots persist. They survive the deaths of individuals. They are carried forward by the calves who traveled them once and then return as adults, traveling them again, perhaps with calves of their own. The root is older than any single narwhal. It may be older than many generations of narwhals. It is, in a quiet sense, one of the oldest things about them. Not a feature of the body, but a feature of the culture, if that word can be used carefully and without overreach. That is what makes the empty Arctic seascape feel different once you know this. What looks like undifferentiated grey water and white ice is, from inside the experience of a narwhal, a landscape of enormous specificity. This channel opens in spring. That bay is where the summer grounds lie. This deep water is where they wait through the long dark. The world is not empty. It is dense with meaning that is simply invisible to eyes that do not know how to read it. And the narwhals read it, year after year, moving along their invisible roads with a patience and a consistency that has outlasted much of what humans have built. The ice shifts, the roots adjust, but the pattern holds, carried forward in the bodies and the memories of animals that have been making this passage longer than anyone has been watching them make it. The fjords will be quiet again soon. The ice will come down, and somewhere offshore, in water too deep and dark to see into, the narwhals will settle into their winter depths, waiting for the light to return and the surface to open and the long road home to become passable once more. Patient, still, already knowing the way. Those long journeys lead, again and again, to the same simple task that shapes every wildlife, finding enough to eat in a difficult place. For the narwhal, that task happens in the dark, not the partial dark of a cloudy afternoon, or the soft dark beneath a forest canopy. The dark of several hundred meters of Arctic water, where sunlight has given up entirely, and pressure is the dominant fact of the world. This is where narwhals go to feed. This is where the patience that shapes their whole existence becomes most visible, most quiet, and most complete. They are not ambush hunters. They are not pursuit hunters in any dramatic sense. What they are, in the water column beneath the ice, is something closer to very deliberate seekers. Animals that have learned, through long generations of living here, where food will be and when. That kind of knowing is not accidental. It is the result of memory and of time. The primary prey varies by season and by location, but certain animals appear again and again in what we know of narwhal diets: Arctic cod, Greenland halibut, and squid, among others. These are not small commitments. A Greenland halibut is a substantial fish, flat-bodied and deep-dwelling, resting on or near the bottom in water that can be 600 meters down or deeper. Reaching it requires a serious dive, a sustained one, performed on a single breath held from the surface far above. That is the structure of a narwhal's feeding life. Rise to breathe, descend into depth, find, pursue and take, rise again. The simplicity of the pattern contains enormous physical effort, and yet narwhals perform it so routinely that it looks, from the outside, almost unhurried. In winter, feeding intensifies. This is the season when narwhals have moved offshore into the deep pack ice, and it is also the season when some of their most important prey is most available. Greenland halibut, in particular, are accessible in winter in the deep basins where narwhals overwinter. The fish are there. The narwhals, having travelled to be in those waters, are also there. What follows is a kind of daily rhythm, the group resting near the surface, breathing at leads and cracks in the ice, and then descending, one after another or in loose coordination, into the dark below. What that descent looks like from the outside, no one has observed directly with any regularity. The ice makes watching nearly impossible, but instruments have been attached to narwhals, and the data they return tells a patient story. Animals diving repeatedly to depths of 500 meters, 600 meters, sometimes deeper, multiple times in a single day. Some dives lasting 25 minutes. The numbers are quiet, but they are not small. Imagine the descent itself. the surface recedes. The light, already dim in the Arctic sky, becomes a pale diffuse glow, then a faint memory, then nothing. The water pressure increases with each meter. The narwhal's flexible rib cage compresses slightly under that pressure, allowing the lungs to adjust rather than resist. Blood has been rerouted, the heart has slowed, and the oxygen stored in muscles and blood is being spent carefully, like a supply that must last until the surface is reached again. And then, somewhere in that dark, there is a fish. How narwhals locate their prey in such conditions brings us back to something already touched on in this journey: the clicks and returning echoes that allow them to perceive at distance what no eye could see. The echolocation that guides narwhals through ice-threaded corridors serves them here too, translated into hunting. A pulse sent outward, a shape registered in the returning sound, a position calculated, the narwhal moving quietly and with precision towards something it has never seen but knows is there. What happens at the moment of capture is not entirely understood. Narwhals have no functional teeth in the ordinary sense. The tusk is the only erupted tooth in most males, and females typically have none visible at all, so they do not bite in the way many predators do. What seems to happen instead is a form of suction. The mouth opens and the sudden negative pressure draws water and the prey within it inward. It is a hunting technique found in other toothed whales as well, and it is well suited to taking fish or squid that cannot easily escape the direction of the pull. It is a quiet way to catch something. No chase, no struggle, a gathering almost. The prey is simply included in the narwhal's world, and then it is gone. That gentleness of method is not softness. It is efficiency shaped by the environment. Pursuing a fish at depth burns oxygen. A chase that takes too long becomes a problem not just of speed, but of breath. The suction method, applied with precision, closes the gap between effort and outcome. Less movement, less cost, more of the oxygen budget preserved for the long ascent back to air. This is one of the ways the narwhal's life reveals itself as a continuous calculation between depth and surface, between staying down long enough to eat and returning upward before the oxygen runs out. Every dive is a negotiation. Every feeding event is timed, however unconsciously, against the clock of a single held breath. And then, the ascent. The pressure releasing. The light returning in whatever form it takes through ice or open water. The surface and the breath that follows. A breath that is both physiological necessity and the simplest possible reset. The body restoring itself. The dive beginning to be forgotten as the next one is prepared for. Narwhals often feed in groups. Whether they coordinate their hunting directly, communicating about the location of prey perhaps, or driving fish toward one another, is not yet clear. What is observed is that feeding tends to happen when animals are gathered, and that the acoustic activity in a feeding group is different from the acoustic activity of a group simply traveling or resting. Something is being communicated, or at least something is being perceived together. The social life and the feeding life are not fully separate. They overlap in the dark, deep water in ways that remain, for now, partially unknown. What is known is that narwhals eat a great deal, particularly in winter. The energy stored in their blubber over the productive summer months is supplemented by active winter feeding in a way that distinguishes them from some other Arctic mammals that simply wait out the cold season. They do not hibernate. They do not significantly slow down. They go deeper into darker water, and they continue. That persistence has a consequence for the world they move through. Every time a narwhal dives to the bottom in search of halibut and returns to the surface to breathe, it carries something upward with it. Not the fish, which is digested, but the nutrients released when digestion occurs. These nutrients, excreted near the surface, become available to the phytoplankton and zooplankton that form the base of Arctic marine food webs. The narwhal, by simply living as it lives, by feeding deep and breathing shallow, acts as a kind of pump, redistributing what the deep holds back into the layers where sunlight can use it. This is the ecological role that is easy to overlook when thinking about any large predator. We tend to think of predators as takers. What they are, just as often, is movers. They take something from one part of a system and, through the ordinary processes of living, return something to another part. The Arctic Ocean is not a simple place with simple flows. It is a layered world, and the animals that move between its layers carry the system's chemistry with them, upward and downward, in patterns that have been running for thousands of years. The narwhal does not know it is doing this. It is simply eating and breathing and descending again. But the ocean notices, in the way that oceans notice things, through the accumulation of small effects over long time, until the pattern becomes part of how the whole system works. There is something restful in that thought, that an animal going about the ordinary work of staying alive can be, without intention, a thread in something much larger. That the dive and the breath and the slow ascent are not just a narwhal story, but part of the story of the Arctic itself. By the time a narwhal has fed enough, the light above the ice, if there is any, may have shifted. Hours pass in the deep. The group, which may have spread during foraging, drifts back into proximity. The clicks and calls that move between them, those low murmurs of acoustic contact, reassert themselves as the animals settle near the surface again. They breathe, they rest. The water holds them in the way it always has, without preference and without urgency. The fish are still down there, in the dark, going about their own patient lives. The narwhals will return to them, but not yet. For now, there is only the surface, the cold air taken in and let go, and the quiet sound of other whales nearby. The task is complete for a little while. The body has what it needs. The depth can wait. And yet, no migration route, no dive, and no icy season is lived entirely alone. Narwhals move through the Arctic in groups, not always large ones, not always stable ones, but groups, animals in close proximity, acoustically aware of one another, adjusting their movements to the movements of others. A pod might number 5 or 6 animals. It might number dozens. During the great seasonal migrations, hundreds of narwhals have been seen traveling together, their breath rising in brief clouds above the open leads, their pale bodies just visible beneath the surface before they descend again, and the water closes over them. What looks from above like a single movement is, from within, something more intricate. Many animals, each making small decisions and somehow arriving at a shared direction. That coordination is not accidental. It is the result of attention paid to others, a kind of continuous listening, not just for the sounds of the sea, but for the sounds of companions. Narwhals, as we have seen, are acoustic animals. Their world is built from sound. And in a pod, that acoustic world is also a social one. The clicks and calls that help a narwhal read the seafloor and locate prey are the same medium through which it remains aware of the animals beside it. The water carries everything. Distance collapses in that way that it does only in the deep and the dark, where sound travels faster than it does in air and farther than light can reach. That is why nearness for a narwhal may feel different than it does for us. We understand presence through sight primarily. We look at someone and know they are there. A narwhal knows the location of its podmates through sound and pressure and the subtle shift of water that a large body creates as it moves. The group is felt as much as seen, and that felt sense of others, continuous, ambient, present even in the dark of a deep dive, may be one of the quiet foundations of narwhal life. The bond that is most clearly documented, and the one that carries the most weight, is the bond between a mother and her calf. Narwhals give birth in summer in the relatively warmer and more open waters of their coastal grounds. A calf arrives small relative to the mother, though still a substantial animal, and it arrives into a world that will immediately ask a great deal of it. The Arctic does not offer a gentle introduction. The water is cold. The distances are real. The ice will return. And yet the calf is not alone in it, because the mother is there, close, consistently present in the weeks and months that follow birth. In the early period, a calf stays near the surface more than an adult would. Its diving capacity is not yet developed. Its blubber layer is thinner. It is learning, in the most immediate sense, what its body can do and what the world around it requires. The mother dives and returns, dives and returns. The calf nurses, taking in milk that is extraordinarily rich in fat. Narwhal milk, like that of other cetaceans adapted to cold water, is dense with energy in a way that supports rapid growth. The calf needs to build its insulating layer quickly, and the milk makes that possible. What makes this period remarkable is not just the physical care, but the proximity. A narwhal calf does not drift away from its mother to explore independently in those early weeks. It stays close enough that their movements are nearly synchronized. The mother surfacing, the calf surfacing beside her, the mother turning, the calf turning with her. The calf is learning the rhythm of breath, the pace of travel, the shape of how a narwhal moves through water. It is learning by being near someone who already knows. How long that close relationship lasts is not entirely certain. Narwhals are not easily studied. The ice, the remoteness, the depth at which they often travel all make sustained observation difficult. But calves are believed to nurse for over a year, possibly longer. And the time spent in close company with a mother likely extends well beyond nursing, because what a young narwhal needs to learn cannot be transferred in a single season. Migration routes, for instance. We explored in an earlier section how narwhal migrations may be learned rather than simply instinctive, passed from one generation to the next through experience and memory. A calf traveling with its mother is not just being carried along. It is acquiring a map. The particular shape of a coastline, the location of a reliable lead in the ice, the depth at which prey tends to gather in a given season. These things accumulate slowly through repetition and attention. A calf that has made the journey once with its mother has made a beginning. A calf that has made it several times begins to carry the route within itself. This is what learning looks like in an animal that lives decades and travels thousands of kilometers. It is not dramatic. It is slow, and close and continuous. The calf swims beside the mother, and the mother swims the route she learned from her own mother, and so the knowledge moves forward in time through the simple act of being together. Beyond the mother-calf pair, narwhal's social structure has a quality of looseness that is itself interesting. Pods are not rigidly fixed. Animals associate with different individuals across different seasons. There appear to be tendencies, females with calves often traveling together, adult males sometimes forming their own groups. But these are tendencies, not rules. The social world of the narwhal is flexible in a way that may suit a life shaped by shifting ice and variable prey. That flexibility is worth pausing on because it suggests something about how narwhals relate to one another. Rigid social structures with fixed hierarchies and stable groups tend to arise in environments where the group itself is the primary unit of survival. Where what you can accomplish together is so much greater than what you can accomplish alone that belonging to a particular group matters enormously. Narwhal society seems somewhat different. The group matters, but the specific composition of the group can change. What remains consistent is not the membership, but the habit of association, the tendency to be near others, to travel with others, to be acoustically connected to others, even when the group's shape shifts. In other words, what narwhals seem to need from one another is not hierarchy or fixed alliance. It is companionship, presence, the ongoing sense of not being alone in the vast and demanding Arctic. There is something in that which is easy to recognize, even across the distance between our kind and theirs. The social calls of narwhals, distinct from the clicks used in echolocation, are still not fully understood. Researchers have documented a range of vocalizations that seem to function in coordination and contact rather than navigation. Animals separated from a group have been observed calling. Animals reuniting have been observed with increased vocal activity. Something is being communicated. Whether it carries anything like what we would call meaning, whether there is content to those calls beyond presence and location, remains an open question and probably will for some time. But what is clear is that narwhals are not silent in one another's company. The acoustic world they inhabit is not only a world of echolocation and prey detection. It is also a world of voice, of contact, of the ongoing background awareness that comes from hearing the animals you travel with. A narwhal in a pod is surrounded by sound that is not just information about the environment, it is information about others. The clicks and calls of podmates are a kind of continuous attendance, a way of knowing, you are here, I am here, we are moving together through this. Imagine the moment of surfacing when a pod rises together. The ice is close but not closing. The lead of open water is wide enough, and several narwhals, 5 perhaps, or 8, break the surface within seconds of one another, exhale their brief visible breath, and descend again. From above, it looks like a choreography. From within, it is simply the result of animals attuned to one another, breathing together because they have been diving together, surfacing together, because the rhythm of the group has become, over the course of a journey, the rhythm of each individual within it. That attunement is one of the subtler forms of social life. It does not require vocalizing. It does not require any deliberate coordination. It emerges from proximity and shared experience, from the fact of having traveled the same water at the same depth for the same hours. The group synchronizes not by choosing to, but by having been together long enough that their bodies have learned the same pace. A narwhal may live for 50 years, perhaps longer. In that span, it will make dozens of migrations. It will know the route from deep offshore wintering waters to summer coastal grounds so well that the knowledge has become part of how it moves through the world, not consulted, but inhabited. And in that same span, it will have been surrounded almost continuously by others. The calves it was near as a young animal may have grown into the adults it travels with now. The mother that taught it the route may be gone, but the route remains, carried forward. The pod shifts and reforms across seasons, but the habit of traveling with others persists. And beneath the ice, in the dim and pressured quiet of a deep dive, the sounds of podmates are still present. Faint, perhaps, at depth, but there. A reminder that the cold and the dark are shared. There is something in the narwhal's social life that feels less like a strategy and more like a preference. Not a behavior adopted because it confers survival advantages, though it likely does, but a way of being oriented toward others, toward the presence of others, the sounds of others, the warmth of moving through difficult water in company rather than alone. The Arctic asks a great deal of anything that lives within it. The narwhal meets those demands with a body shaped over millions of years for exactly this world, and it meets them also with others beside it. The two things are not separate. The body and the bond are both part of how this animal survives and both part of how it lives. The pod moves through the water. The surface is close. The ice is somewhere above. And the narwhals are together in the dim and patient deep, each one aware of the others, each one held in the quiet acoustic presence of a group that has been traveling the same invisible roads for longer than any of them can know. Seen from a distance, the tusk is a symbol, but from within a narwhal's life, it may be something quieter, stranger, and more intimate. We have spent time with the tusk already. Its spiral, its length, the centuries it spent as legend. But knowing what it is, structurally, is different from wondering what it is to have one. And that is a question worth sitting with for a while. The tusk grows from a tooth, usually the upper left canine, extending forward through the lip and out into the water ahead. In most males, it grows throughout life, reaching lengths of 2 to 3 meters in the longest cases. It is not hollow at the tip, but it is not entirely solid either. At its core runs a pulp canal, soft and living, connected to nerves, connected to blood. That is not a small detail. It means the tusk is alive, in a way that an antler or a shell is not. It is sensitive. It feels. Research has found that the outer surface of the tusk is not hard and sealed, as you might expect of a tooth exposed to the ocean. Instead, it is permeable, porous in a way that allows seawater to move through the outer layers and reach the interior. Millions of tiny tubules run from the surface inward. And because those tubules connect to nerve endings, the tusk may register temperature, salinity, and pressure. It may feel the water that flows around it. That is worth pausing on. An animal moving through the Arctic Ocean may be reading that ocean through the tooth that extends from its face. Not tasting, exactly. Not in the way we would mean the word, something older and less nameable than that. What makes this so difficult to hold is that we have no equivalent. We do not have a sense organ that reaches 2 meters ahead of us into the world. We cannot imagine what that perception feels like from the inside, or whether it feels like anything at all in a way we could recognize. The narwhal gives us a fact and then retreats behind a wall of genuine unknowing. And yet the fact remains. The tusk is porous. The nerves are real. Something is received. In males, the tusk is nearly universal. In females, it is rare. That asymmetry has always suggested social function, that the tusk is involved in how narwhals relate to one another, how they signal, how they compete or display or establish place within a group. Male narwhals have been observed crossing tusks at the surface, a behavior called tusking, slow and apparently deliberate. Whether this is combat, play, communication, or some combination is not fully settled. It may not be one thing. What we can say is that when two animals with sensitive, nerve-filled structures touch those structures together, something is likely being exchanged, not in any mystical sense, simply in the physical sense that two living tissues, both capable of sensation, are in contact. Whatever that means to a narwhal, and we do not know what it means, it is not nothing. There is also the possibility that the tusk communicates without contact. Size, straightness, length, condition, these things are visible. A longer tusk may signal something about age, health, or history. Other narwhals can see it. They may read it. We do this with faces and posture and the tone of a voice, and we rarely think about how much information we are receiving and transmitting in any given moment. The narwhal may do something similar in a medium we cannot enter. That is why the tusk resists being reduced to one explanation. It may be sensory organ and social signal at once. It may be a structure that does several things simultaneously, the way a hand both touches and gestures and holds. Asking what the tusk is for may be the wrong kind of question, the kind that expects a single clean answer where life has instead offered something layered and unresolved. The females who carry tusks at all carry shorter ones, less consistent, less pronounced. And yet, female narwhals survive. They migrate, they feed, they raise calves, they navigate ice and depth and the acoustic dark of Arctic water. The tusk, then, is not a survival tool in the simplest sense. It is not required the way blubber is required, or the way the ability to echolocate is required. It is something else. Something the males carry in a way that shapes their experience of the world, and perhaps their experience of each other in ways we are still only beginning to describe. Imagine, just once, swimming with something ahead of you that could feel the water's temperature shift, the slight change in pressure as the sea floor rises beneath you, the slow warming that tells you a current is changing. Not as a thought, not as information processed and interpreted, just as sensation, continuous and ambient. The way cold air feels on skin you have forgotten is exposed. That is one way to think about what the tusk might offer. A constant, quiet reading of the world. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the sensitivity is subtle, occasional, meaningful only in specific moments. We do not know. That is not a failure of this account. It is an honest description of where understanding currently rests. What we know is that the narwhal carries this structure through its entire adult life. It grows alongside the animal. It enters every dive, every migration, every surfacing through a breathing hole in the ice. It is present in the dim water of winter and the brighter water of summer. It is there when the animal sleeps and when it hunts and when it rests among others of its kind. That kind of constant presence tends to become part of how a creature experiences itself. The way the weight of a body becomes unremarkable, the way the sound of one's own breathing fades from awareness. The tusk is simply there, always part of what it is to be moving through water as this particular animal. And if it is also sensitive, if it does receive something from the world, then the narwhal may carry at the front of its face a quiet, ongoing conversation with the ocean it moves through. Not dramatic, not a superpower in the way that word tends to be used, just a slow, continuous noticing, the way the body always knows more than the mind has been asked to attend to. There is something restful in that image, an animal moving through dark water, tusk extended, receiving the faint signals of temperature and pressure and salt, not seeking anything specific, not alarmed, just present to what the water is saying. Patient in the way that only creatures without language can be patient, without the need to name what they are receiving, without the need to decide what it means. The tusk will outlast the narwhal that grew it. Ivory persists, the animal does not. And so, the tusks that have reached human hands, through trade, through history, through the long and complicated story of people and Arctic animals, carry within them the spiral record of a life lived in cold water, a life in which something was always reaching forward into the dark, and the dark was always, in its quiet way, reaching back. We do not need to resolve what the tusk means to a narwhal. We can simply let it be unresolved, the way the best questions are. Not anxious, not demanding an answer, but open. A thing to rest beside. A structure that is stranger and more intimate than a symbol, stranger and more intimate than a weapon or a tool, stranger and more intimate than almost anything we have a word for. The tusk extends forward. The water moves around it. Whatever is received in silence, in the cold, in the slow and patient dark beneath the ice. And the more we consider the narwhal's present life, the more it seems to carry a much older story within it. Not old in the way a rock formation is old, or a forest is old. Old in the way that living things carry their history inside them, in the architecture of bones, in the shape of blood vessels, in behaviors that were already ancient before the Arctic looked the way it does today. The narwhal is not simply an animal living in ice. It is the result of a long accumulation of change, each layer resting on the one before it, going back further than the ice itself. That is a strange thing to sit with. The ice feels permanent. It feels like the oldest thing in that world. And yet the narwhal's lineage reaches back further still. Whales, as a group, did not begin in the water. This is one of those facts that seems impossible the first time you encounter it, and then, slowly, begins to feel like exactly the kind of thing the world would do. Roughly 50 million years ago, the ancestors of all whales were land-dwelling mammals. They breathed air at the surface of the world. They had 4 limbs. They moved across ground. And then, across millions of years, something shifted. Or rather, many things shifted slowly, generation by generation, in the direction of water. The earliest ancestors were not committing to the sea. They were wading, then swimming, then spending more time submerged than above. The return was gradual, driven not by intention, but by the slow accumulating pressure of what worked and what did not. Hind limbs became smaller, then vestigial, then gone from the outside, though traces remain inside the body, small internal structures that no longer attach to anything, quiet evidence of what was once there. Nostrils migrated backward along the skull until they became the blowhole at the top of the head. The body lengthened. The forelimbs became flippers, the bones inside them still recognizable as the bones of a hand, if you know how to look. What this means is that every whale alive today carries within its skeleton the faint outline of a life on land. Not as a flaw, not as a leftover problem, as a record. From that shared origin, whales diversified into many forms. And within that long branching of lineages, the narwhal belongs to a particular family, the Monodontidae. It is a small family as whale families go. In fact, it contains only 2 living species, the narwhal and the beluga. These 2 animals are close in ways that go beyond appearance. They share a common ancestor, and that ancestry is written in the things they have in common. Both lack a dorsal fin, that tall ridge seen on dolphins and orcas. Both are highly vocal. Both live in Arctic and subarctic waters. Both are capable of expressing something in their movement and behavior that, to a careful observer, seems almost communicative in the way of animals that have learned to read one another closely over a very long time. And yet, they are also quite distinct. The beluga is pale, almost white, soft-faced, flexible in the neck, in a way most whales are not. The narwhal is mottled, spotted, carrying that extraordinary spiral tooth shaped by a different set of pressures and a somewhat different range. They are close relatives who have become, over millions of years, genuinely different answers to the question of how to live in cold water. That question has been asked for a long time. The Monodontidae lineage diverged from its closest relatives somewhere around 10 to 15 million years ago. The Arctic, as we know it, the specific configuration of ice, current and cold that narwhals now depend on, is much younger than that. The Arctic Ocean has gone through many configurations across geological time. It has been warmer. It has been covered in different patterns of ice. The climate has shifted in ways that would be unrecognizable to us now, which means the ancestors of narwhals were adapting to conditions that no longer exist in waters that have since changed, alongside prey populations and ice patterns that have come and gone many times over. What we see in a narwhal today is not a fixed solution. It is the current expression of a process that has been running for millions of years, adjusting, shifting, finding new configurations of the same basic theme: how to be a large mammal in very cold water beneath a ceiling that moves. The blubber that insulates a narwhal today, the compact shape that retains heat, the absence of a dorsal fin which reduces heat loss and allows movement through narrow leads in the ice. These were not designed. They accumulated. Each small variation that helped an ancestor survive the cold was more likely to persist in the next generation, and the next, until the body that carries all of those variations looks, from the outside, as if it was made for exactly this purpose. It was not made. It arrived. There is something in that distinction worth resting with. When we look at a narwhal and see a body so precisely suited to Arctic life, it is natural to feel that the animal belongs there in some deep and essential way, that the ice and the whale were made for each other. And in a sense, they were shaped by each other. The environment did not design the narwhal, but it did select for the narwhal that exists. Every feature that works in that environment became more common. Every feature that did not was quietly removed from the population, not by any force or intention, but simply by the arithmetic of survival. That is why the narwhal feels so inevitable, so right-shaped for its world, because the world had millions of years to work on it. And the narwhal, in a sense, has been working on the world too, diving to depths that bring nutrients toward the surface, moving prey populations through the water column, carrying the ocean's chemistry through its body and releasing it in different places. Even a narwhal at rest is participating in something larger than itself, as all living things do, connected to everything around it by the simple fact of needing to eat, breathe, and move. The beluga and the narwhal diverged from their common ancestor, and that ancestor diverged from something else before it, and so on, back through time to the wading creature at the edge of ancient water, testing the shallows. Somewhere in that chain is every configuration of body and behavior that led, eventually, to a spotted whale in the high Arctic, carrying a spiral tooth through water that has not yet frozen. It is a long chain. Most of the links are invisible to us now, known only through fragments of bone preserved in rock, through the careful comparison of living species, through the slow work of understanding what features are shared and what features diverged and when. The picture is incomplete. It will always be incomplete. But even the incomplete picture suggests something vast. That the narwhal is not an isolated thing, not a strange invention of the Arctic, but a single expression of a lineage that has been finding its way through changing oceans for a very long time. That lineage continues. In every narwhal alive today, the whole of that history is present, not as memory, not as knowledge, but as structure, as the particular angle of a jaw, as the density of blubber, as the specific frequency of a click sent forward into dark water and listened for on the return. The Arctic is changing now in ways that are faster than anything the narwhal's lineage has encountered through the slow pressures of geological time. The ice is shifting. The patterns of freeze and thaw that narwhals have navigated across generations are no longer as predictable as they were. This is not a comfortable thought, and it is not the thought to carry into sleep. But it sits alongside the longer thought, the deeper one. That life is ancient and adaptable and has moved through enormous change before. What the narwhal carries is not fragility. It is a long record of persistence. And so, the narwhal moves through water that is also moving through time. The ice above it has formed and melted and formed again countless times across the history of this lineage. The seas have risen and fallen. The continents have shifted, slowly, in directions the ocean has had to accommodate. And through all of it, some ancestor of this animal kept finding a way, kept breathing at the surface, kept diving into the cold, kept passing something forward to the next generation. The narwhal beneath the ice tonight does not know any of this. It does not carry its evolutionary history as something it can access or reflect upon. It simply is what it is. A body shaped by deep time, moving through cold water, surfacing to breathe, descending again into the quiet dark. That is enough. That has always been enough. The history is present whether it is known or not. It is there in the bones, in the blubber, in the slow spiral of a tooth that grew from a jaw that was shaped by pressures that began long before the Arctic looked the way it does today. The narwhal carries all of it, quietly, without effort, without awareness, the way all living things carry the long story of what they come from, simply by being alive. Perhaps that is why, whenever humans encountered narwhals, we rarely left them as simply animals. Something about the tusk made that impossible. A long spiral emerging from the water, or washing ashore, or arriving in the hands of a trader with no explanation attached. It asked for a story before it asked for a name. And stories came. They always do, when the world offers something that does not fit the shapes we already know. The Inuit had lived alongside narwhals for thousands of years. They knew what the tusk was and where it came from. They hunted narwhals with great skill and considerable care, and the animal was woven into their lives not as a mystery, but as a neighbor, a real creature with real habits, real seasons, real flesh and bone. The Inuit name, narwhal, carries within it something often translated as corpse whale, a reference to the mottled pale skin that can, at a certain angle in certain light, resemble something drowned. It is not a romantic name, it is an observational one. It belongs to a tradition of naming that does not reach for the mythological, because the real animal was already known, already present, already enough. That directness is worth sitting with for a moment. When you know an animal, you name it plainly. When you do not know it, you fill the silence with imagination. And to most of the world, for most of recorded history, the narwhal was unknown. The tusk arrived without the animal. It traveled south through trade routes, passed from hand to hand across the Arctic and into Scandinavia, into the markets of medieval Europe. Long before anyone in those markets had seen the sea the tusk came from. By the time it reached a European buyer, it had been separated from its source by so much distance and so many transactions that the source had become, effectively, mythological. No one could say with confidence where it came from, and so they said what they imagined. The tusk was called alicorn. It was said to come from the unicorn, that singular, impossible horse with a single horn at the center of its forehead. The unicorn was already ancient by then, already embedded in European imagination as a creature of purity and power, untamable except by innocence. And here was its horn, physical and real, a spiral of dense ivory that could be held in both hands. The myth and the object confirmed each other. The horn made the unicorn real. The unicorn made the horn precious. What followed was an economy built on a story. Alicorn was considered among the most valuable substances in the medieval world. It was believed to neutralize poison, which made it extraordinarily desirable to anyone who feared assassination, which, in medieval courts, was nearly everyone of importance. Cups were carved from it, or inlaid with fragments of it, so that wine poured into them would supposedly bubble and reveal any toxin added by an enemy. Powdered alicorn was sold as medicine. Whole tusks were given as diplomatic gifts between monarchs, valued at many times their weight in gold. The Danish throne was constructed partly from narwhal tusk, an object of such apparent significance that it seemed appropriate to build the seat of power from it. All of this because a tooth from a whale had traveled too far from its origin to carry any explanation with it. There is something here that is not mockery. It would be easy to read this history as simple error, as a kind of collective foolishness that we have since grown out of. But that reading is too comfortable. The people who traded in alicorn were not fools. They were working with the information available to them in a world where the Arctic was not a place you could simply visit and return from with a narwhal in tow. The gap between the object and its origin was genuinely enormous. And into enormous gaps, imagination flows naturally. It cannot help itself. The question the narwhal raises is not whether those people were wrong. They were about the horn, about the unicorn. But what it means that the gap existed at all, that an animal could live in the world, real and present, and swimming through dark Arctic water, while simultaneously existing in human imagination as something entirely different. Two parallel existences. One true, one invented. And the invented one shaping history, moving money, adorning thrones, while the true one simply continued beneath the ice, knowing nothing of any of it. That is a strange kind of power for an animal to have without knowing it holds it. The gap closed slowly. Explorers pushed farther north. Accounts of actual narwhals began to reach the same audiences who had believed in unicorns. A Danish naturalist in the 17th century connected the tusk to the whale formally, in writing, in terms that could be examined and debated. The alicorn trade did not collapse immediately. Belief rarely collapses cleanly, but it began to soften, to shift, to lose its certainty. The unicorn receded. The narwhal remained. And yet something interesting happened in that transition. The narwhal did not become ordinary. It could not quite manage that. An animal with a single long spiral tusk, living beneath Arctic ice, diving to extraordinary depths, navigating by sound in near-total darkness. This is not an animal that becomes mundane simply because you have explained it. The explanation itself is strange. The reality holds its own wonder without any assistance from legend. That is what the narwhal teaches, if it teaches anything at all, though it is not trying to teach. It simply is what it is. But what it reveals, in the long arc of its relationship with human imagination, is that reality is stranger than our myths tend to be. The unicorn was a beautiful idea, but it was a familiar shape, a horse made more wonderful. The narwhal is not a familiar shape. It is a whale with a 10-foot tooth growing from its face, living in one of the coldest and most pressurized environments on the planet, finding its way through darkness by listening to echoes. No one would have invented this. It is too specific, too unlikely, too precisely itself. Myths tend toward the general. They reach for archetypes, for animals that represent virtues or forces. The unicorn represented purity. The dragon represented power. These are ideas wearing animal shapes. Real animals, by contrast, represent nothing. They simply exist in all their particular strangeness, shaped by pressures and histories that have nothing to do with what we find meaningful. That particularity is part of what makes them more wondrous than the myths they inspired. The Inuit relationship with the narwhal holds something important here. It is a relationship built not on symbol, but on knowledge. To know an animal across generations, to know its habits, its seasons, its sounds, its body, its role in the world you share, is to have a relationship that does not need the animal to be anything other than what it is. There is respect in that. There is a kind of intimacy in it that myth cannot quite achieve, because myth requires distance to function. You cannot mythologize something you know well. Familiarity does not breed contempt so much as it breeds accuracy, and accuracy is its own kind of reverence. The narwhal was never a unicorn. It was always this, a pale whale turning slowly in cold, dark water, its long tooth extended ahead of it, its family nearby, its breath held against the depth, its whole body an answer to a world most creatures cannot survive. That is what it was when the tusks were being sold in medieval markets. That is what it was when explorers first brought back drawings that seemed unbelievable. That is what it is now. It did not need the legend. The legend needed it, needed something real to anchor itself to, something physical to carry the weight of an idea. And now the legend has faded, as legends do. The narwhal remains. There is something quietly reassuring in that. Not triumphant. The narwhal is not triumphant. It is simply still here, still patient, still moving through water so cold and so deep that we have only recently begun to understand what its life actually involves. But reassuring in the way that the persistence of real things is always reassuring. Stories end. Animals continue. The ice shifts. The whale breathes. The tusk, that ancient and improbable tooth, catches whatever faint light reaches it at the surface before the narwhal descends again into the quiet dark where it has always lived. The world is full of creatures we have not yet learned to see plainly. The narwhal was one of them for a very long time. Perhaps there is patience required in that too, a patience the narwhal itself has never needed to practice because it has never been waiting to be understood. It has simply been there, beneath the ice, being what it is. And now we stop knowing and simply become. The light comes first. Not warmth, there is no warmth here, but a pale, diffuse brightness that finds you through the ice above. Blue-white, shifting. It filters down from the frozen ceiling in long, soft columns, and you have always known this light. It is the first thing the day gives you, and it is enough. You are still. Your body hangs in the water with almost no effort. The cold is everywhere outside you, pressing in from all directions, but it does not reach you. There is something between you and the cold, thick and settled and old, and it holds the sea at a distance, the way a wall holds out the wind. You are warm at your center. The water does not know this. It presses close and finds nothing to take. The pod is near. You can feel this before you can locate it. There are presences in the water, soft and familiar, distributed in the dim space around you. Someone is slightly above, someone is off to your left, and there are others, further, but not far. The water between you is not empty. It carries information, always. You have never been alone in it. You rise. It is not a decision exactly. The body knows when it is time. You tilt upward and the ice ceiling comes toward you, and there is the breathing hole, a dark gap in the white above. And then you are through it, and the air arrives. Cold, sharp, clean in a way that has no comparison. You breathe. The breath goes deep, and the body accepts it the way dry earth accepts rain, fully and without delay. A moment at the surface. The ice stretches in every direction, white and grey and faintly blue, and the sky above it is pale with the long Arctic light that is neither morning nor afternoon, but simply present, diffuse even. There is no sun to find. There is only the brightness that comes from everywhere at once. You breathe again, then you descend. The light fades as you go down. Blue becomes grey, becomes a dim, quiet dark. The pressure increases, not painfully, but perceptibly, as though the sea is acknowledging your presence, noting that you have entered somewhere serious. Your body adjusts. Something inside you slows. The deep rhythm takes over, patient and deliberate, and you carry your breath down with you into the dark like something carefully held. The tusk moves through the water ahead of you. You do not see it. You feel it. The water arrives along its length before it arrives anywhere else, and there is information in that. Temperature, current, the faint chemical traces of things that passed through here before you. You have always read the water this way, It is not a skill. It is just how the world comes in. Deeper, the bottom is not visible. It is not needed. What you are looking for is not on the floor, but in the water column itself. A thickening of presence, a cluster of small movements, something that the sound can find before the eye ever could. You send a pulse into the dark. It leaves you and travels outward, and the silence that follows is not empty. It is full of returning information, distance, density, shape. The dark resolves not into vision, but into something more precise than vision, a kind of knowing that arrives all at once, already sorted, already understood. There is something ahead, several somethings, small and clustered and moving slowly. You move toward them. What happens next is not dramatic. It never is. There is a gathering of attention, a slight adjustment of direction, and then the water closes around the prey with a kind of quiet inevitability. You are not fast. You do not need to be. Precision is enough here. In the dark, at depth, where patience is the only currency that matters. Then you ascend. The light comes back slowly. Grey first, then blue, then the pale white glow of the ice above. The breathing hole, the cold air, the breath. You rest at the surface for a moment. Around you, others are doing the same. You can hear them, not the way a human hears, but through the water, through the body, a whole vocabulary of presence and location, and something that might be, in its way, recognition. The pod moves together without needing to discuss it. The next direction is simply known. The day continues like this: descent and ascent, dark and light, breadth and depth. It has a rhythm that is not monotonous but restful, the way a tide is restful. Something that repeats not because it has run out of ideas, but because the pattern itself is the point. The ice shifts above you throughout the day. Cracks appear and close. The leads, those long, narrow passages of open water, widen in some places and narrow in others. You know where the breathing holes are. You have always known. The knowledge is in the body, not in any conscious accounting, and it has never failed you. The ceiling is always moving, and you move with it, the way you have always moved with everything here. Not against it, but alongside it, reading it as you go. At some point, the light begins to change. Not dramatically. The Arctic does not trade in drama, but there is a softening, a slight deepening of the blue that filters down through the ice, and the body registers it the way it registers everything. Quietly, without announcement. The pod drifts closer together. The movements between you slow. There are fewer pulses sent into the dark, fewer descents. The day's hunting has been done. The body is satisfied in a way that is deeper than fullness, a settled quality, a quietness at the center that the cold cannot touch. You find a place beneath a wide shelf of ice. The others are near. Someone young is very close to someone older, and the water between them carries a warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. You have felt this your whole life, this quality of nearness, of bodies in proximity, of a world that is cold and dark and enormous, and yet somehow within the pod, contained, held, enough. You rise once more to breathe. The air is the same as it has always been, cold, sharp. The sky above the ice is dimming now into the long, slow Arctic evening, the light thickening toward a blue that is almost purple, almost nothing, almost sleep. The ice stretches out in every direction, vast and pale and still. You descend for the last time today. The dark receives you gently. Your body finds its depth and holds there, suspended, neither rising nor sinking. The blubber does its work without any effort from you. The cold is held at a distance. The others are nearby in the water, their presences soft and familiar, their sounds occasional and low. Your heart finds its deep water pace, slow, patient, almost geological. The tusk drifts ahead of you in the dark, reading the water, finding nothing urgent. The water is still tonight. The ice above is still. The sounds that come through the water are distant and slow. The long, low conversations of the frozen sea, the settle and shift of ice that has been doing this for longer than you have been alive. You are not looking for anything. The day is done. You hang in the dark water beneath the ceiling of ice, and the cold is outside you, and the warmth is inside you, and the others are near, and the breathing hole is known, and there is nothing required of you now. Nothing to find, nothing to navigate, nothing to decide. The water holds you. The ice holds you. The pod holds you. Your body settles into the stillness the way a stone settles into soft sand. Gradually, completely, without resistance. The darkness is not frightening. It has never been frightening. It is simply where you live, where you have always lived, where the cold and the pressure and the dim shifting light have shaped everything you are. You breathe when you need to. You return when you must. But for now, you are still. The water is dark and the ice is quiet, and the others are near, and the long Arctic night is beginning its slow arrival. And somewhere above the frozen ceiling, the pale light is fading into something even softer, even quieter, even more still. And you rest, and the sea rests around you, and everything continues slowly in the dark. By now, the facts have softened into something simpler. The feeling of a life perfectly at home in a world that still seems impossible to us. A pale whale beneath ice, a spiral tooth no one has fully explained, a body shaped by cold across millions of years, moving through dark water in a sea that sometimes closes over completely, and still continuing, still breathing, still diving, still traveling the same invisible roads its ancestors traveled in the same Arctic silence. There is no drama in that. That is the thing. Endurance, when it has lasted long enough, stops looking like struggle. It starts looking like belonging. The narwhal does not experience its world as harsh. The cold is simply the cold. The ice is simply the ceiling through which it rises to breathe. The darkness of deep water is where the fish are, and so it descends, patient and unhurried, and returns. This is not survival against the odds. This is a life fitted to its place so precisely that the place no longer feels like a challenge. It feels like home. That is what time does. Given enough of it, strangeness becomes ordinary. The impossible becomes the only way things are. Let your jaw be soft now. Let your hands rest open, loose against whatever holds them. There is nothing they need to hold. The narwhal is somewhere in the Arctic tonight, moving or still, resting near the surface or descending into the dark. Part of a pod or briefly alone in the water, its tusk angled slightly downward as it glides. It does not know it is remarkable. It has never needed to. And perhaps that is the quietest wonder of all, that the most extraordinary things in the world simply go on being what they are, not performing strangeness, not aware of being watched or named or turned into legend, just living in the particular way that millions of years of living have made possible. Your body is heavy now. Let it be heavy. The weight is easy. The weight is simply what rest feels like when it is allowed to be complete. Somewhere, beneath white water and blue ice, a narwhal rises to breathe. The breath is brief. The sound of it is small against all that silence. And then it descends again, back into the dim and ancient cold, back into the world it has always known. It does not need to be understood to be here. It does not need to be believed to be real. It passes through the water, slow and pale and unhurried, and the water closes behind it, as though it was never there at all, except that it was. It is. It continues. Your eyes are heavy. Let them be heavy. There is nothing required of you now. Nothing to know, nothing to hold, nothing to keep. Only this, the dark water and the quiet shape moving through it, and the ice above, and the stillness of a world that has been here far longer than any of us, going on in its patient and extraordinary way. Sleep well and good night.